Judge Lenora Tate, 60 years old and black, slams her gavel in a packed Memphis courtroom, convicting a white cop of brutality. Cheers erupt, but a uniformed officer charges forward, slapping her hard across the face. He snarls a slur, expecting silence, but Lenora's icy glare cuts deeper than his hand. The crowd freezes, whispers buzzing. She's no pushover. 4 minutes later, the slap echoes beyond the walls, promising ruin. What will this spark unravel? Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if justice drives you, hit like and subscribe because tomorrow's explosive episode is unmissable. Lenora Tate stood behind the bench, her cheek throbbing where Sergeant Victor Hale's hand had landed moments ago. The Memphis courtroom buzzed with stunned murmurs, 60 pairs of eyes locked on her, waiting for her next move. At 60 years old, she'd seen plenty in her 3 decades on these marble floors, first as a scrappy defense attorney battling for black clients the system chewed up, then as a prosecutor slicing through corruption, and now as the first black woman to wear a judge's robe in this city's highest court. Her silver-flecked braids were pinned tight, her brown eyes sharp as broken glass, missing nothing. She'd broken ceilings and taken the splinters, but this was new. A white cop slapping her in open court, spitting "coon" like it was nothing, thinking he'd walk away clean. Her voice cut through the chaos, steady as steel. "Bailiff, detain Sergeant Hale for assault." The room jolted. Hale, mid-40s, buzz-cut blonde hair and a jaw carved from arrogance, barked a laugh that echoed off the oak-paneled walls. "You serious, lady? I'll be out in 10 minutes. His blue eyes glinted with the smug certainty of a man who'd never paid a price. The bailiff, a wiry black man named Terrence, hesitated, glancing at the 2 other officers in the back, their hands twitching near holsters. Lenora's stare pinned him. "Now, Terrence." He moved, grabbing Hale's arm. Hale jerked free, chest puffing, but Terrence wrestled him toward the side door, cuffs clicking. The crowd erupted again, some cheering, others hissing, a journalist in the corner scribbling furiously. Lenora adjusted her robe, the sting on her face pulsing, but she kept her chin high. She'd just convicted one of Hale's buddies for smashing a black teen's skull with a baton, and this slap was their tantrum. She'd won, hadn't she? Hale was in custody. Justice would stick this time, or so she thought. 4 minutes after the gavel fell, the courthouse doors swung open, and in stormed Captain Leonard Grayson, Hale's boss, a 6'4" ex-Marine, with a buzz cut graying at the temples and a presence that sucked the air from the room. His uniform gleamed, medals pinned like trophies, but his hazel eyes burned with something darker than duty. Grayson ran the precinct like a fiefdom, 30 years of power stacked on favors and fear. Everyone knew his name, whispered it in corners, a 3rd-generation cop whose granddaddy once wore a hood and whose daddy turned a blind eye to lynchings. He strode to the bench, boots thudding on marble, and leaned in close, his breath hot with coffee and contempt. "Let him go, Tate. This doesn't need to get messy." Lenora didn't flinch, her voice low and firm. "He assaulted me in my courtroom, Captain. That's a felony. He's not walking out." Grayson's lips twitched, not quite a smile, more a predator baring teeth. "You're making a mistake. I'll have him released by noon. Drop it, or you'll wish you had." His words hung heavy, a promise wrapped in threat. She met his gaze, unflinching. "Files already with the clerk. It's done." He straightened, towering over her, then turned without another word, his shadow stretching long as he left. The room exhaled, but Lenora's gut twisted. She'd seen men like Grayson before, men who thought badges were shields for anything they wanted to do. She'd beaten them before too, hadn't she? Hale was locked up, the charge filed. She'd won this round. The day dragged on, cases blurring into each other, vandalism pleas and bond hearings, but her mind stayed on Grayson's threat. By 5, the courthouse emptied, the sun dipping low over Memphis, casting long shadows across the Mississippi River. She grabbed her coat, a navy wool thing that hung past her knees, and stepped into the parking lot, the air crisp with early spring chill. Her car, a 10-year-old silver Toyota, sat alone under a flickering streetlight. She stopped cold. All four tires were slashed, rubber sagging into puddles of defeat. Across the hood, carved deep into the metal with a knife or a key, sprawled a single word: nigger. Her breath caught, not from fear but from fury, a slow boil that climbed her spine. She spun, scanning the lot, but it was empty, just the hum of traffic on Beale Street a mile off. Her fingers brushed the welt on her cheek, still tender, and she clenched her jaw. This wasn't random. This was Grayson, or Hale, or both, sending a message. She pulled out her phone, snapped photos of the damage, and called a tow truck, her voice clipped but calm. The driver, a grizzled white man with a beard like steel wool, winced when he saw it. "Damn shame, ma'am, you piss off the wrong folks." She didn't answer, just watched as he hooked the car up, the word glaring under the tow's headlights. Back at home, a modest brick house in Orange Mound, she locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and sat at her kitchen table, a cup of black coffee cooling in her hands. The slap replayed in her head, Hale's sneer, Grayson's warning, the tires, the slur. She'd fought for 30 years in this city, a place where the ghosts of segregation still lingered in the humid air, where the Liberty Bowl stood proud. But the streets told a different story. She'd clawed her way up, taken every slight, every snub, and turned it into fuel. First black woman on the bench, they'd said, like it was a gift, not a war she'd won. Some folks still couldn't stomach it, couldn't stand seeing her in that robe, wielding that gavel. She'd known the price, the rocks they'd throw, the whispers they'd hiss, but this was different. This was physical, personal, a line. Crossed. She filed the assault charge thinking it'd stick, that the system she'd spent her life upholding would back her. Hale was in a cell, wasn't he? She'd stood her ground, but Grayson's voice gnawed at her, that casual menace. "You'll wish you had." And now her car, her sanctuary, defiled. She sipped the coffee, bitter on her tongue, and stared at the photos on her phone, the jagged letters etched into silver paint. Her instincts, honed over decades, prickled. Something was off, something bigger than a slapped judge and a vandalized car. She'd seen Hale's type before, hot-headed, reckless, but Grayson was calculated, a chess player with pawns across the board. He'd voided Hale's arrest already, she'd bet on it. She checked her watch, 8 o'clock, and called the precinct, her voice tight. "This is Judge Tate, status on Sergeant Victor Hale." The desk officer, a young woman with a drawl, paused too long. Ma'am, he's out. Captain Grayson signed off an hour ago. Said it was a misunderstanding." Lenora's grip tightened on the phone, knuckles paling. "A misunderstanding? He struck me in court. That's on record." The woman stammered. "I just follow orders, ma'am. He's gone." The line clicked. Dead. Lenora set the phone down, slow and deliberate, her pulse thudding in her ears. Out by noon, Grayson had said, but he'd done it faster. A power play to show her who ran this town. She stood, walked to the window, and peered through the blinds. The street was quiet, porch lights flickering in the dusk, but her skin crawled. She'd won nothing. Hale was free, Grayson was flexing, and the tires were just the start. She thought of the courtroom, the gavel in her hand, the weight of her robe. She'd built her life on that authority, on the belief that justice could bend toward right if you pushed hard enough. But now, staring at the empty street, she felt the ground shift. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about what they'd do next, how far they'd go to bury her. She turned off the kitchen light, the darkness settling around her like a shroud, and sat back down, eyes on the phone. The photos stared back. That word, a taunt, a dare. She'd fought bigger battles, hadn't she? She'd faced down worse than Hale and Grayson. But as the clock ticked past 9, the silence grew heavy, and her cheek burned anew. She'd filed the charge, stood her ground, thought she'd struck a blow. Instead, she'd lit a match, and the fire was coming for her. Lenora Tate woke to a phone buzzing like a hornet's nest, the clock glowing 3 in the morning. Her cheek still ached from Sergeant Victor Hale's slap, her mind replaying Captain Leonard Grayson's threat and the slur carved into her car's hood the night before. She'd barely slept, the coffee cold on her Orange Mound kitchen table when she grabbed the device. 50 missed calls, hundreds of texts, notifications piling up like debris after a storm. Her sister, Tanya, had sent a link. "Sis, your Everywhere. Lenora clicked it, and there it was, courtroom footage on YouTube, time-stamped 8 hours ago. The video showed Hale charging her bench, his hand cracking across her face, the slur spitting from his lips, her unflinching stare. As the crowd gasped, the title screamed in all caps, "Racist Cop Slaps Black Judge in Court." The view count ticked past 2 million, comments flooding in, a wildfire she hadn't lit. She scrolled, heart pounding. "Justice for Judge Tate," one read. "Memphis, PD's a disgrace," another. A local news site had picked it up, then CNN, then Twitter. Hashtags like "Monis Judge Tate" and "Monis End Police Racism" trending nationwide. By sunrise, the video hit 5 million views, and Lenora's name was a battle cry. She stood, pacing her hardwood floor, the 60-year-old judge suddenly a symbol. She'd wanted Hale charged, sure, but this was bigger. Protesters gathered, outside the courthouse by 8, a sea of signs and chants. "No justice, no peace," echoing off the neoclassical columns. Lenora drove up, her towed car still in the shop, borrowing Tanya's beat-up red Honda. She stepped out, navy coat, buttoned tight, and the crowd roared, a wall of sound that shook her bones. A young black woman, maybe 20, thrust a megaphone at her. "Speak, Judge, we've got your back." Lenora hesitated, then took it, her voice steady. "I'm here for the law, not the spotlight, but I won't back down." The cheers swelled, fists raised, phones recording. She felt it then, a surge of power, not from her gavel but from them. Hale was free, Grayson had flexed, but this outrage, it could force their hand. She'd won something, hadn't she? The system couldn't ignore this. She walked inside, heels clicking on marble, believing the tide had turned. By noon, the courthouse steps were a circus, news vans parked crooked, reporters shouting questions. Lenora sat in her chambers, blinds cracked, watching the chaos. Her clerk, a nervous white kid named Ethan, burst in, laptop in hand. "Judge, you need to see this." He spun the screen, and her stomach dropped. A new video, uploaded an hour ago, titled "Judge Tate Attacks Officer, Full Story." It was the same footage but butchered, edited to show her stepping forward first, her arm raised like she'd lunged at Hale. The slap looked like self-defense, his slur cut out, her glare framed as aggression. The caption read, "Activist. Judge provokes cop cries racism." Comments exploded. "She's a fraud." Typical race baiter. Lenora's fists clenched, nails biting her palms. "Who posted this?" Ethan swallowed. "Anonymous, but it's from a precinct IP, already at 1 million views." She stood, fury coiling tight. Grayson. It had to be. He'd taken her win. The public's rage and twisted it into a lie. The precinct backed it fast. A press release hit at 1, Hale's voice dripping through every channel. "She came at me," I reacted. "I'm no racist, just doing my job." Grayson followed, stone-faced, on live TV. "Sergeant Hale's a good officer. Tate's blowing this out of proportion." The narrative shifted, a slick machine grinding her down. Her phone buzzed again, unknown numbers now, not support, but venom. "Go back to the ghetto, bitch. You'll pay for this." She silenced it, hands trembling, but kept her face still. She'd seen this playbook before, 30 years of microaggressions, dismissals, but never this fast, this brutal. The protesters outside split, some still chanting her name, others wavering, confused by the smear. She thought she'd struck a blow, that the video would nail Hale to the wall. Instead, Grayson had turned it, made her the villain. She sat, staring. At the blinds, the roar outside fading to a murmur. Ethan hovered, unsure. "Judge, what do we do?" She didn't answer, mind racing. She'd won nothing. The system wasn't bending, it was biting back. By 4, the threats escalated. Her email inbox overflowed, racial slurs in all caps, promises, of violence graphic enough to churn her stomach. She forwarded them to the sheriff, a grey-haired man she'd known since her prosecutor days, but his reply was curt. "We'll look into it." She knew that tone, nothing would happen. She stood, grabbed her coat, and headed to her office down the hall, needing air, needing space. The corridor was quiet, fluorescent lights humming, her footsteps sharp against the tile. She unlocked her office door, stepped inside, and froze. Glass crunched under her heel. The window, a tall pane overlooking the river, was shattered, jagged edges glinting in the late afternoon sun. A brick lay on the carpet, red and chipped, smeared with black marker. Know your place. Her breath hitched, not from the word but from the weight. It had missed her desk by inches, missed her head if she'd been there. She knelt, brushing the glass, her fingers steady but her pulse hammering. This wasn't a prank, this was a warning, a step past tires and slurs into something raw, physical, aimed to kill. She called security, voice flat. Someone threw a brick through my window, get up here. The guard, a stocky white guy named Paul, arrived panting, eyes wide. Jesus, Judge, you okay? She nodded, pointing to the brick. Bag it. I want prints. He fumbled, gloving up, but she knew. It'd be clean. Grayson's too smart for smudges. She stepped to the broken window, wind tugging at her coat. The Mississippi rolling brown and slow below. The protesters were still out there, smaller now, voices hoarse. She'd thought the video was her weapon, that 5 million views would force justice. She'd felt the crowd's heat, believed it could topple Hale, maybe even Grayson, but they'd flipped it, smeared her, struck her where she stood. Her cheek burned anew, the slaps echo louder now, joined by this, a brick through glass. She turned, staring at the brick in Paul's plastic bag, the words stark against the red. This wasn't just about Hale anymore, not just a cop's tantrum. This was Grayson, the precinct, a system she'd spent her life serving, now clawing. To bury her. She thought of her 30 years, the battles, the ceilings shattered, the nights she'd sat alone in this office, case files stacked high, fighting for folks who looked like her, who'd never see a win. She'd been naive, hadn't she? Thinking a viral video could break a machine this old, this deep. Her phone buzzed again, another threat. Burn, monkey! And she shut it off, tossing it onto the desk. The guard left, brick in hand, and she stood alone, glass crunching underfoot. She'd won nothing today, not yet. The crowd outside thinned, the sun dipped low, and her office grew cold. She'd lit a spark, sure, but Grayson had fanned it into something else, something that could swallow her whole. She straightened, jaw tight, and locked the door. This was war now, and she'd fight it her way. But as she sat, the brick's message burned into her mind, a question gnawed. How far would they go to silence her? Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Lenora's fight is worth it. Hit like if you're raging at Grayson's lies, and subscribe because the next twist will leave you speechless. What happens when a judge becomes the target of a city's hate? Lenora Tate woke with a crick in her neck, the motel bed sagging under her 60-year-old frame. She'd fled her orange mound house after the brick shattered her office window yesterday, the threats piling up like storm clouds over Memphis. Her cheek still bore a faint welt from Sergeant Victor Hale's slap 3 days ago, a reminder of the war she'd stumbled into. The viral video, now at 10 million views, had made her a lightning rod, and Captain Leonard Grayson's doctored clip had turned half the city against her. She showered quick, hot water stinging her skin, and dressed in a charcoal suit, braids pulled tight. Today she'd fight back. She'd demanded a public hearing on Hale's assault, scheduled for 9, sharp at the courthouse. She drove Tanya's red Honda through morning traffic, the Mississippi River glinting under a gray sky. Protesters still camped outside, signs faded but defiant. She parked, stepped out, and faced the crowd, their chants a dull roar. Tate! Tate! She nodded, jaw set, and pushed through, reporters swarming, mics jabbing at her face. Inside, the courtroom hummed, packed with journalists, lawyers, and onlookers, the air thick with sweat and anticipation. Lenora took her seat, not behind the bench but at a table beside her attorney, a wiry black woman named Denise Cole, 40 and fierce. Across the room Hale sat, buzz-cut blonde hair gleaming, blue eyes smug, his precinct uniform crisp despite the suspension she'd thought she'd won. Grayson loomed in the back, 6'4", hazel eyes locked on her, a predator waiting to pounce. The hearing began, the presiding judge, an older white man named Harold Vance, banging his gavel. Order. We're here to address the assault on Judge Lenora Tate by Sergeant Victor Hale. Denise stood, voice sharp. We have the unedited courtroom footage, Your Honor. It shows Hale striking Judge Tate unprovoked, using a racial slur in front of witnesses. She played the video on a screen, Hale's hand cracking across Lenora's face, the word coon ringing out, the crowd's gasp echoing. The room erupted, shouts clashing, Vance hammering for silence. Lenora sat, still feeling the sting anew, but her eyes burned with something fiercer than pain. Denise pressed on. "This is a felony assault compounded by hate. We demand Hale's immediate suspension pending trial." Vance nodded, scribbling notes, and Lenora felt it, a flicker of triumph. The crowd leaned forward, phones up, live streaming. Every word. Hale's lawyer, a slick white guy named Paulson, stood adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, Sergeant Hale acted in self-defense. Judge Tate's behavior was aggressive." He waved off the video, smirking. "Context matters." Vance frowned, but before he could rule, Denise slammed the table. "Self-defense? He slapped a judge in her own courtroom." The crowd roared again, fists pumping, and Lenora's chest swelled. Vance raised a hand, voice gruff. "Enough. I've seen the tape. Sergeant Hale, you're suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending further investigation." Cheers exploded, a wave crashing over the room, and Lenora exhaled, her first real win since the slap. Hale's smirk vanished, his jaw tightening, and Grayson's face darkened in the back, but she'd done it. She'd struck a blow. The hearing adjourned, and she stepped outside, the crowd swarming her, chanting her name. She thought for a moment she'd turned the tide. Justice was hers, wasn't it? She'd exposed Hale, forced accountability. But Grayson wasn't done. By noon, the victory soured. Lenora sat in her chambers, Denise beside her, when Ethan, her clerk, rushed in, pale as milk. "Judge, they've got something on you." He shoved a tablet into her hands, a news alert blazing. "Judge Tate accused of racial bias in 2004. Case?" The story claimed she'd framed a white client as a young defense attorney, losing the case out of spite against his race. It quoted a forged affidavit from the client, long dead, alleging she'd planted evidence to tank him. Lenora's stomach twisted, bile rising. "This is a lie. I never touched that case like that." Denise scrolled, eyes narrowing. "It's spreading fast. Fox picked it up, then local stations. They're calling you a hypocrite." Lenora stood, pacing, the room shrinking around her. She'd fought that case clean, a petty theft rap, lost fair and square when the jury wouldn't buy her client's story. But this was Grayson's handiwork, a dagger from the past to gut her now. Her phone buzzed, Tanya's voice frantic. "Sis, they're trashing you on TV. What's happening?" Lenora forced calm. "It's a smear. I'll fix it." But could she? The story hit social media, hashtags flipping from Nah Judge Tate to Nah Tate Lies, bots amplifying the noise, protesters. Outside wavered, some peeling off, others shouting louder. By 3, the DA's office called. She knew the DA, Richard Ellis, a balding white man who golfed with Grayson every Sunday. His voice oozed fake concern. "Lenora, we've got a problem. This 2004 thing's messy. We're launching an ethics probe into your conduct." She gripped the phone, knuckles whitening. "Richard, you know this is bullshit." "Grayson's behind it." He sighed, all crocodile tears. "My hands are tied. It's procedure." The line went dead, and she slammed the phone down, wood creaking. Denise looked up, grim. "They're trying to discredit you. Strip your robe." Lenora nodded, slow and cold. "They won't stop Hale's suspension, but they'll bury me instead." She'd won in court, hadn't she? Hale was off the street. But Grayson had flipped it, turned her victory into a noose. She thought of the crowd, the cheers, the unedited tape. It wasn't enough. The system she'd served for 30 years was clawing back, and she was the prey. She left the courthouse at 6, sky bruising purple over Memphis, the crowd thinner, now voices hoarse. She drove to Tanya's place, a small duplex in Whitehaven, needing family, needing ground. She parked, stepped out, and froze. Smoke curled into the dusk, thick and acrid, the smell hitting her like a punch. Across Tanya's, lawn across burned, 10 feet tall, flames licking the air, orange tongues snapping at the night. Lenora's breath caught, her legs locking. She'd seen photos, heard stories from her grandma about nights like this, but never here, never now. The wood crackled, spitting embers onto the grass, and neighbors peeked from blinds, silent. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. "There's a cross burning on my sister's lawn. Send someone." The dispatcher, a bored white woman, paused. "We'll get to it." The line clicked off and Lenora stood, staring at the fire, the heat prickling her skin from 20 feet away. Tanya ran out, eyes wide, wrapping a shawl round her shoulders. "Lenora, what the hell?" Lenora grabbed her, pulling her back. "Inside, now." They retreated, locking the door, and Lenora peered through the curtains as the flames danced. No sirens came, not after 10 minutes, not after 20. She called the precinct direct, voice tight. "This is Judge Tate. Where's my response?" The officer, a gruff man, grunted. "Busy night, ma'am. We'll send someone when we can." She hung up, fury boiling over, Grayson again or his cronies flexing their reach. The cross burned for an hour before a lone fire truck rolled up, dousing it slow like they had all the time in the world. The cops never showed. Lenora sat with Tanya, the house dark, the stink of smoke seeping through the walls. She'd demanded. The hearing played the tape, got Hale suspended. She'd thought it was a win, a crack in their armor, but Grayson had struck back, harder, uglier, digging up lies, torching her name, now this, a cross blazing in her family's yard. She'd spent 30 years in these courts, first defending black kids the law crushed, then prosecuting the rot, then judging from the bench, breaking every barrier they threw at her. She'd believed in the fight, in the slow bend toward justice. But this was a beast she hadn't faced, a system that didn't just bend, it broke you. The flames were out, but the message lingered, charred wood stark against the grass. She'd won nothing today, not really. Hale was off duty, sure, but she was the one burning now, and Grayson was just getting started. Lenora Tate stood in Tanya's darkened living room, the stench of burnt wood seeping through the walls after the cross burned out on the lawn last night. Her 60-year-old bones ached, her cheek still tender from Sergeant Victor Hale's slap 5 days ago, now layered with the weight of Captain Leonard Grayson's relentless counterattacks. The viral video, the brick through her office window, the ethics probe sparked by a fake 2004 case, all of it had her reeling, but that flaming cross pushed her past fury into desperation. She needed an edge, someone inside the system to fight back. She dialed Marcus Wells, her old friend and the deputy clerk at the courthouse, a black man who'd climbed the ranks beside her for decades. His voice crackled through the phone, warm but wary. "Lenora, you okay? Saw the news about the cross?" She paced, hardwood creaking under her slippers. "I'm alive, Marcus, but I need you. Grayson's burying me. Can you dig into his file? Anything buried, complaints, evidence?" He paused, breath heavy. "That's a big ask, but for you. I'm in, give me a day." She exhaled, a flicker of hope igniting. Marcus knew the courthouse like his own pulse, had seen her battle as a defense attorney for black kids chewed up by the law, then as a prosecutor cutting through corruption, now as Memphis's first black female judge. If anyone could find dirt on Grayson, it was him. She spent the day holed up at Tanya's, blinds drawn, avoiding the motel after the brick, her phone silenced against the flood of threats. By dusk, Marcus called back, voice low. "Meet me at the old diner on Poplar, 8 tonight. I've got something." She drove over, Tanya's red Honda rattling through Memphis's humid night, the river's edge glowing under streetlights. The diner was a relic, neon flickering, booth sticky with grease. Marcus sat in the back, 55, graying at the temples, his suit rumpled, a thick manila folder in hand. She slid in across from him, heart ticking fast. "What did you find?" He pushed the folder over, eyes darting to the door. "Grayson's a ghost on paper, but I dug deep. 3 unsolved deaths, black civilians, all tied to his precinct. Excessive force complaints. Witnesses scared off. Evidence lost. Dates match his shifts." Lenora flipped it open, pages trembling in her hands. A 20-year-old beaten in an alley, skull cracked, case dropped. A mother tased to death during a traffic stop, resisting scratched on the report. A teen shot point blank, gun planted, ruled justified. Her breath caught, rage coiling tight. "This is gold, Marcus. We can nail him." He nodded, cautious. It's enough to start something, maybe get internal affairs moving. She leaned back, the vinyl squeaking, mind racing. Hale's suspension yesterday was a win, but this? This could topple Grayson's empire, the whole rotten precinct. She'd been slapped, smeared, threatened, her family targeted, but now she had a weapon. She clasped Marcus's hand, gratitude flooding her. You're a lifeline, thank you. He squeezed back, faint smile breaking through. We've been through worse, right? She left the diner, folder tucked under her arm, hope surging. She'd won this round, hadn't she? Evidence in hand, Grayson's crimes exposed. She drove back to Tanya's, the night thick with possibility, imagining the headlines, the feds swooping in. But by midnight, that hope shattered. She sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea, when her phone buzzed, a news alert flashing. She clicked. It, and her blood ran cold. Live footage streamed from a press conference outside the precinct, Marcus standing stiff beside Grayson, his face ashen, eyes avoiding the camera. Grayson's voice boomed, calm and venomous. Deputy Clerk Marcus Wells has come forward with disturbing allegations against Judge Lenora Tate. She coerced him into falsifying records to smear Sergeant Hale and myself. This is a pattern of corruption. Marcus stepped to the mic, voice flat. She threatened my job, my family. I had no choice. Lenora's mug slipped, shattering on the tile, tea pooling like blood. She stood, chest heaving, betrayal slicing deeper than Hale's slap. Marcus, her rock, her ally, turning on. Her? Grayson's hazel eyes glinted on screen, a predator savoring the kill. The broadcast cut to anchors, voices smug. Tate's credibility's crumbling. Sources say an arrest warrant's pending. She stumbled to the window, peering through. Blinds, the street dark and still. Marcus had the folder, the truth, and he'd handed it to Grayson, flipped it into a lie. She'd thought she'd struck gold, that those deaths would bury him. Instead, he'd buried her deeper. Her phone rang, Tanya bursting in from the hall. Lenora, cops are outside. She dropped the call, heart slamming, and peeked again. 2 squad cars idled, lights off, shadows moving. A fist pounded the door, loud as thunder. Memphis PD, open up, Tate! Tanya grabbed her arm, eyes wide. What do we do? Lenora's mind spun, but she straightened, voice steel. Let them in, I've got nothing to hide. Tanya unlocked it, and 4 officers stormed through, white men in crisp blues, faces hard. The leader, a burly guy with a buzz cut, smirked. Lenora Tate, we've got a warrant. Illegal firearm possession. She blinked, ice flooding her veins. What firearm? He shoved past, barking orders, and they tore the place apart, cushions ripped, drawers dumped, Tanya gasping in the corner. Lenora stood rigid, watching as another cop, younger, knelt by her bed, pulling a black pistol from beneath the mattress, triumphant. Got it! The leader spun it in a bag, grinning. Planted or not, it's yours now, hands behind your back. She didn't move, voice low. You're framing me. He laughed, cuffs clicking. Tell it to the judge, Judge. They dragged her out, Tanya screaming, neighbors peering from porches as lights flashed red and blue. The gun was a lie, Grayson's doing, Marcus's betrayal the key. She'd spent 30 years in these courts, defending the defenseless, prosecuting the guilty, judging from the bench, breaking every wall they built. She'd thought Marcus was her shield, that his find would crack Grayson open. She'd walked from that diner feeling victorious, the folder her sword. But Grayson had turned it, twisted Marcus, planted the gun, and now she was the criminal. They shoved her into the squad car, metal biting her wrists, the door slamming shut. She stared through the window, Tanya sobbing on the lawn, the crosses, ashes still black against the grass. The car rolled, Memphis blurring past, Beale Street's neon a distant glow. She'd won nothing tonight. Not the evidence, not the fight. Grayson had struck harder, deeper, using her trust against her. The precinct loomed ahead, a grey fortress, and she knew this was just the start. She'd lit a fire, sure, but it was burning her now, and Grayson was fanning the flames. Drop a comment with number 1 if you're gutted by Marcus's betrayal. Hit like if Grayson's corruption makes your blood boil, and subscribe because the next chapter's chaos will blow your mind. Can Lenora claw her way out of this trap, or is Grayson's grip too tight? Lenora Tate sat in the back of the squad car, wrists chafed raw by cuffs, the planted gun's weight a lie heavier than the steel biting her skin. 6 days ago, Sergeant Victor Hale had slapped her in her Memphis courtroom, sparking a war she hadn't foreseen. Now Captain Leonard Grayson's frame job, fueled by Marcus Wells's betrayal, had her rolling toward the precinct, Tanya's screams fading behind her. The 60-year-old judge, first black woman on the circuit bench, stared out the window, Memphis blurring past in streaks of neon and shadow. Her cheek still throbbed from Hale's hand, but the sting of Marcus's press conference cut deeper, his voice echoing on loop. "She threatened my family." The cops up front, a burly driver and a smirking shotgun rider, chuckled low, their radios crackling with static. They pulled up to the precinct, a squat concrete block bristling with antennas, and yanked her out, her charcoal suit rumpled braids. Slipping loose, cameras flashed, a dozen reporters swarming the lot, mics thrusting forward, voices shouting over each other. "Judge Tate, is it true you hid a gun? Are you corrupt?" She kept her head high, lips sealed, as they paraded her through the gauntlet, lights blinding, the spectacle Grayson wanted. Inside, they shoved her into a holding cell, bars clanging shut, the air sour with sweat and bleach. She stood, refusing the bench, her mind racing. Marcus's folder, those 3 unsolved deaths tied to Grayson, had been her ace, her shot at breaking his empire. She'd tasted victory at the diner, thought she'd turned the tide after Hale's suspension, the viral video, the hearing. But Grayson had flipped it all, twisted Marcus, planted the gun, and now she was here, caged like the clients she'd defended 30 years ago. Hours crawled by, her legs aching, when her lawyer, Denise Cole, burst in, eyes blazing. "They're charging you with felony possession. I've got a play." She slid a USB drive through the bars. Audio of Grayson bribing Marcus, leaked from a precinct whistleblower. It's shaky, but it's something. Lenora's pulse quickened, fingers closing around the drive. "Get it out there." Denise nodded, vanishing as fast as she'd come. By morning, the audio hit the news, Grayson's gravelly voice snarling through speakers citywide, "Turn on her, Marcus, or your kids pay." Twitter erupted, number of Free Judge Tate trending, protesters flooding the precinct steps, 1,000 strong, signs sharp with rage. Lenora sat in her cell, listening to the muffled chants through thick walls, hope flickering. Denise worked fast, filing an emergency motion, and by noon, a judge, old Harold Vance from the hearing, called it in. Lenora stood before him in a borrowed courtroom, cuffs off, suit wrinkled but spine straight. Vance peered over his glasses, voice gruff. "This audio raises doubts, charges dismissed, pending investigation." The gallery exploded, cheers shaking, the rafters, and Lenora exhaled, ribs loosening. She walked out free, the crowd swarming her, hands clapping her back, voices roaring her name. She hugged Denise, the USB her lifeline, and thought for a moment she'd turned it around. Grayson's bribe exposed, the gun case tossed, the people behind her. She'd won, hadn't she? The precinct couldn't bury this. She stood on the steps, sun beating down, feeling the tide shift. But Grayson wasn't finished. That night she crashed at Tanya's, too rattled to return to her own charred lawn, the cross's ashes still a scar on the grass. She flipped on the TV, sipping water when breaking news cut in. A shaky live stream showed a white supremacist mob, 50 strong, marching through Whitehaven. Torches blazing, Confederate flags snapping in the wind. They chanted, "Tate's a liar," and "White rights now." Lenora's glass slipped, water splashing her lap as the camera panned to her house, not Tanya's, 2 miles away. Molotov cocktails arced through the air, shattering windows, flames licking up the brick, her 30 years of life inside devoured by fire. She stood, chest heaving, Tanya rushing in, gasping, "That's your place." Lenora grabbed her phone, dialing 911, voice tight. "My house is burning. Send help." The dispatcher, a man this time, paused. "Units are tied up, ma'am." She slammed the phone down, screen cracking, and ran to the window, peering out. No sirens wailed, no lights flashed, just the distant glow of her life in ashes. The news, Cut to a reporter, breathless. Police are on scene but not intervening. Sources say this is retaliation for Judge Tate's release. She sank onto the couch, hands trembling, the room spinning. Her home, her sanctuary, gone, and the cops stood by, smirking, just like they'd ignored the cross. Tanya knelt beside her, voice shaking. "They're trying to kill you." Lenora nodded, slow and cold, the truth sinking in. She'd leaked the audio, got the charges dropped, walked free to cheers. She'd thought it was a win, a crack-in. Grayson's armor, the crowd her shield. But he'd struck back harder, unleashed a mob, burned her world to the ground. She thought of her 30 years, defending black kids the law crushed, prosecuting rot, judging from the bench, breaking every barrier. She'd believed in the fight, in justice bending if you pushed. But this was a beast unleashed, a system that didn't just resist, it destroyed. She stood, grabbed Tanya's keys, and headed for the door. "Where you going?" Tanya called, desperate. "To Denise, we're not done." She drove, the Honda's engine whining, the city a blur of lights and smoke. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You're next." She tossed it aside, knuckles white on the wheel. Denise met her at a gas station, a mile from the precinct, eyes wide. "Saw the fire. You okay?" Lenora shook her head, voice low. "They burned my house, Denise. Cops watched." Denise cursed, pacing. "Grayson's behind this. That mob's his muscle." Lenora nodded, the USB still in her pocket, Grayson's voice a ghost in her ear. She'd exposed him, walked out of that cell, felt the crowd's roar. She'd thought it was enough that the truth would hold, but Grayson had escalated, turned her victory into ash, her home a pyre. She thought of the slap, the video, the hearing Marcus's betrayal, every step she'd taken to fight back. She'd spent her life in these courts, 30 years of battles, scars earned breaking ceilings they never wanted her to touch. She'd believed in the law, in its slow grind toward right. But now, staring at the gas station's flickering sign, the distant smoke curling over Memphis, she saw it clear. This wasn't just about Hale or Grayson anymore. This was the system she'd served, baring its teeth, and she was its prey. She'd won nothing today, not really. The audio had freed her, sure, but her house was gone, her safety torched, and Grayson was still out there, plotting. She turned to Denise, voice steel. "We need more, he's not stopping." Denise nodded, grim. "Neither are we." They drove off, the night swallowing them, the city alive with danger. Lenora's cheek burned anew, the slap's echo joined. By the crackle of flames, the mob's chants, the cops' laughter. She'd lit a fire, thought she'd wielded it, but Grayson had seized it, turned it against her. She'd walked free, yes, but at what cost? Her home was ash, her family exposed, and the war was just beginning. Lenora Tate slumped on a creaky motel bed, the hum of a cheap AC unit battling the Memphis heat, her 60-year-old frame weary from a week of hell. 7 days ago, Sergeant Victor Hale's slap in her courtroom had sparked this nightmare, and now her house was ash, torched by a white supremacist mob while cops smirked on the sidelines. Captain Leonard Grayson's empire had framed her with a gun, burned her life down after she'd leaked audio of him bribing Marcus Wells, her once trusted ally. She'd walked free from that false arrest yesterday, the crowd's cheers still ringing, but victory tasted like smoke. She showered, water lukewarm against her skin, and dressed in a borrowed grey blouse and slacks, braids loose from the fight. Her lawyer, Denise Cole, sat across from her on a wobbly chair, eyes fierce. "We're suing the precinct for negligence," Denise said, slapping a legal pad on the table. "They let your house burn. We've got witnesses, footage." Lenora nodded, slow and resolute, her cheek still tender from Hale's hand. "Do it. Hit them where it hurts." Denise filed the suit by noon, a federal claim demanding millions, alleging the Memphis PD failed to protect her, stood by as racists, razed her home. The news broke fast, headlines screaming, "Judge Tate sues police after arson attack." 3 witnesses, neighbors who'd watched from porches, swore statements. Cops parked 50 feet away, laughing as flames roared. A shaky video surfaced, a teen's phone catching officers sipping coffee while her roof collapsed. Protesters swelled outside the precinct again, signs sharper now. Grayson must go. Lenora watched from the motel TV, volume low, hope flickering. The suit gained traction by day 2, legal analysts buzzing on cable, calling it a slam dunk. Denise dug deeper, subpoenaing precinct logs, proving no units were tied up that night. Lenora met her at a diner off Beale Street, grease thick in the air and gripped a coffee mug, knuckles pale. "We've got them, right?" Denise grinned, sliding over papers. "They're sweating. Grayson's testifying tomorrow." Lenora exhaled, the first real breath in days. She'd spent 30 years in these courts, defending black kids the law crushed, prosecuting rot, breaking ceilings as the first black female judge here. She'd thought the audio win, the dropped charges, were her comeback, but the mob had stolen that. This lawsuit, though, this could crack Grayson's armor. She pictured him squirming under oath, his hazel eyes narrowing, that 6'4" ex-Marine frame shrinking. She'd won this time, hadn't she? The precinct couldn't dodge this heat. Day 3, Grayson took the stand in a packed federal courtroom. Uniform crisp, medals glinting, voice steady as stone. Lenora sat in the gallery, Denise beside her, the air electric with tension. He faced questions coolly, denying negligence, claiming resource shortages kept cops back. Then Denise stood, voice cutting like a blade. "Captain, explain this log. No calls, no emergencies, yet your men stood by while Judge Tate's house burned." Grayson's lips twitched, a predator cornered but calm. "Clerical error," he said, shrugging. The gallery murmured, unconvinced, and Lenora felt it, a shift, the truth pressing through. She thought he was cracking, his empire teetering. The judge, a stern black woman named Evelyn Ross, leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You're under oath, Captain. Explain the video." Grayson blinked, a rare flinch, and Lenora's chest swelled. She'd won, hadn't she? He was trapped, but Grayson had an ace. That afternoon he produced a document, a yellowed affidavit, slamming it onto the table like a gavel. "Judge Tate's no saint. This proves she took bribes as a prosecutor in '98, derailed a white defendant's case for cash." The room gasped, reporters scribbling, cameras whirring. Lenora's stomach dropped, ice flooding her veins. She'd never touched a dime, never bent a case, but the paper looked real. Stamps, signatures, a notary seal. Denise shot up. "Objection, this is fabricated, irrelevant." Ross frowned, peering at it. "I'll allow it for now, proceed." Grayson's lawyer, a shark named Hargrove, grinned. "Her corruption's a pattern. She's suing to deflect her own guilt." Lenora's fists clenched, nails biting her. Palms. She'd prosecuted clean 30 years ago, fought for justice when the system spat on her clients. This was Grayson's lie, a ghost from her past to haunt her now. The suit unraveled fast, whispers spreading, the crowd outside thinning. By evening, Ross dismissed it, voice flat. Insufficient evidence of negligence, compounded by credibility issues. Case closed. Lenora sat stunned, Denise cursing under her breath, the courtroom emptying like a deflated lung. She'd thought the witnesses, the video, would nail Grayson, force accountability. She'd felt the heat of victory, pictured him breaking. But he'd flipped it again, smeared her deeper, and walked free. She left, sky bruising purple over. Memphis, Tanya's Honda rattling as she drove back to the motel, mind numb. She'd won nothing, not the suit, not the fight. Grayson's empire stood tall, and she was the one crumbling. She parked, stepped out, and froze. Their boom shattered the night, a fireball erupting 50 feet away. Denise's sedan exploding into a storm of flame and metal. Lenora dove behind the Honda, shrapnel zinging past, a jagged piece slicing her arm, blood welling hot. She screamed, ears ringing, the motel lot ablaze, guests spilling out in panic. Sirens wailed distant as she crawled to her feet, arm throbbing, eyes locked on the wreckage. Denise staggered from the motel door, alive but shaken, glass in her hair. "Lenora!" she yelled, running over. "You hit?" Lenora shook her head, blood dripping, then spotted it, a note fluttering from the Honda's windshield, pinned by a rock. She snatched it, hands trembling, ink stark against white. "Next time it's you." Her breath hitched, the fire's heat licking her face, Denise's car a twisted skeleton. She'd sued them, brought witnesses, thought she'd cornered. Grayson? She'd felt the courtroom shift, believed justice was close, but he'd struck back, savage and swift, a bomb to silence her, a note to promise more. She thought of her 30 years, defending the defenseless, prosecuting the guilty, judging from the bench, breaking every wall they threw up. She'd believed in the law, in its slow grind toward right, even after the slap, the mob, the frame. But this was a beast unbound, a system that didn't just resist, it killed. She stood, arm bleeding, the note crumpled in her fist, Denise panting beside her. Fire trucks rolled in, late as always, hoses blasting, but the damage was done. She'd won nothing tonight, not the suit, not her safety. Grayson had escalated, turned her fight into a death sentence, and she was running out of moves. She turned to Denise, voice low. "We need a new plan." Denise nodded, grim, the fire's glow painting her face. "He's not stopping." Lenora stared at the note, the words a taunt, a dare. She'd lit a fire, thought she'd wielded it, but Grayson had seized it, turned it into this, a blast to break her. Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Grayson's gone too far, hit like if Lenora's resilience blows you away, and subscribe because the next chapter's going to flip everything you expect. What happens when a judge's last stand ignites a city's fury? Lenora Tate woke to the ache in her arm, the gash from last night's shrapnel crusted with blood, the motel room's stale air thick with the memory of Denise's car exploding. 8 days ago, Sergeant Victor Hale's slap in her Memphis courtroom had ignited this war, and Captain Leonard Grayson's empire had since burned her house, framed her, and now tried to kill her, the note "Next time it's you" still crumpled in her pocket. Her 60-year-old body groaned as she stood, the failed lawsuit against the precinct a fresh wound atop the rest. She showered, water stinging the cut, and dressed in a borrowed black jacket and jeans, braids pulled back tight. Denise banged. On the door at 7, eyes red from smoke and sleeplessness. "The city's pissed, Lenora. They're rallying for you today, downtown, noon." Lenora nodded, jaw set. "Good, let's use it." They drove Tanya's red Honda through Memphis, the Mississippi River glinting under a cloudy sky, the streets buzzing with tension. By 11, thousands gathered in Court Square, a sprawl of bodies, signs, and fury, the air electric with chants. Justice for Tate. Grayson's a thug. Lenora stepped from the car, Denise at her side, and the crowd parted, a sea of faces, black, white, young, old, roaring her name. A makeshift stage stood at the square's heart, a megaphone waiting. She climbed up, legs shaky but resolve iron, and gripped it, her voice booming over the masses. "I've spent 30 years fighting in your courts, for your kids, your rights. They slapped me, burned my home, bombed my lawyer's car, but I'm still here and I'm not backing down." The crowd erupted, a tidal wave of sound, fists pumping, phones flashing, the energy a living thing. She felt it, a surge of power, not from her gavel but from them. The mayor, a nervous white man named Paul Decker, took the mic next, sweat beading on his brow. "We hear you. I'm ordering a full investigation into Captain Grayson and the precinct." Cheers swallowed his words, and Lenora exhaled, her chest loosening. She'd sued and lost, but this was bigger. Thousands strong, a mayor's promise. She'd won, hadn't she? Grayson's days were numbered. She stepped down, the crowd swarming her, hands clapping her back, hope blazing in their eyes. She thought the tide had finally turned, that this rally could break his empire. But Grayson had other plans. At one, as the crowd thickened to 5,000, a crack split the air, sharp and final. Lenora spun, heart lurching, as screams erupted. A young black man, maybe 20, crumpled 10 feet away, blood pooling on asphalt, a bullet hole in his chest. Another shot rang out, then a third, and chaos swallowed the square. People ran, shoving, falling, signs snapping underfoot. As 3, more bodies dropped, a white woman, a teen girl, an older man, all red blooming on their shirts. Lenora dove behind the stage, Denise yanking her down, wood splintering above their heads. "Snipers!" Denise yelled, voice raw. Lenora peeked. Out, spotting muzzle flashes on a rooftop 200 yards off, a grey building overlooking the square. The crowd scattered, wails rising, blood streaking the pavement, and she saw it clear. Grayson's work, a massacre to crush her fight. Cops swarmed in, late and useless, batons out but guns down, barking orders over the panic. Lenora's stomach churned, bile rising as paramedics raced past too slow. 3 dead, maybe more, and she was the target, the rally her trap. By 2 the news broke. Helicopters buzzing overhead, anchors breathless. Mass shooting at Judge Tate rally, 3 confirmed dead, dozens injured. Lenora sat in a police van, Denise beside her, blanket over her shoulders, arm throbbing. Under a hasty bandage, a detective, a wiry white guy named Sims, leaned in, voice flat. "You're under arrest, Tate. Manslaughter. You incited this." She blinked, ice flooding her veins. "What?" He smirked, cuffs gleaming. "Your speech riled them up. Grayson warned us you'd cause trouble." She stood, blanket falling, fury boiling over. "Shui sent snipers, you idiot. This is his doing." Sims shrugged, grabbing her wrists, metal clicking tight. "Tell it to the judge." They dragged her out, cameras flashing, the crowd, thinned but furious, shouting her name, some clawing. At the cops, others sobbing over bodies. She saw Grayson on a TV screen in the van, live from the precinct, his uniform pristine, face somber. "I warned the city about Tate's reckless activism. This tragedy's on her." His hazel eyes glinted, a predator victorious, and Lenora's fists clenched, nails biting her palms. They shoved her into a cell, bars slamming shut, the air cold and damp, her arm pulsing with pain. She stood, refusing, the bench mind reeling. She'd rallied the city, felt their roar, thought the mayor's probe would nail Grayson. She'd tasted triumph, believed she'd turned the war. But he'd flipped it, sent killers to the rooftops, turned her stand into a bloodbath and pinned it on her. Hours later, a guard, a young black woman with tight braids, slipped her a note. "They beat you bad, you okay?" Lenora nodded, unfolding it. "Grayson's orders, stay strong." She crumpled it, heart pounding as boots echoed down the hall. 2 cops stormed in, white, burly, eyes hard, batons swinging. Batons. "Time for a chat, Tate," one growled, slamming her against the wall, ribs cracking under the blow. She gasped, pain exploding, but kept her feet, staring them down. "Grayson send you?" The other laughed, a wet, ugly sound, and swung again, baton smashing her side, fracturing bone. "You don't learn, do you, nigger?" he spat, each hit punctuated with slurs. "Coon, bitch, trash," until she slid to the floor, blood trickling from her lip, ribs screaming. They left, boots thudding away, and she lay there, breath shallow, the cell spinning. She'd spent 30 years in these courts, defending the defenseless, prosecuting rot, breaking ceilings as the first black woman on the bench. She'd believed. In the fight, injustice bending if you pushed, even after the slap, the fire, the bomb. But this was a beast unleashed, a system that didn't just resist, it slaughtered. She'd rallied thousands, thought she'd won their voice, the mayor's ear. But Grayson had escalated, turned her stand into a graveyard, her freedom into cuffs, her body into a punching bag. She forced herself up, leaning on the wall, ribs grinding, blood staining her jacket. The guard peeked in, eyes wide, but said nothing, slipping away. Lenora stood trembling, the note's words a faint pulse. "Stay strong." She'd won nothing today, not the rally, not the fight. Grayson had struck harder, deadlier, pinning corpses on her, breaking her bones. She thought of her 30 years, the battles, the scars, the nights alone with case files, fighting for folks who looked like her, who'd never see a win. She'd believed in the law, in its slow grind toward right. But now, curled in that cell, ribs cracked, blood drying, she saw it clear. This wasn't just about Grayson anymore. This was the system she'd served, bearing its fangs, and she was its prey. She'd lit a fire, thought she'd wielded it, but he'd seized it, turned it into this, a massacre to bury her. She wiped her lip, tasting iron, and straightened. Pain be damned. She wasn't done, not yet. Lenora Tate woke on the cold concrete of her cell, ribs screaming from the beating she'd taken last night, blood crusted on her lip, her 60-year-old body a map of bruises. 9 days ago, Sergeant Victor Hale's slap in her Memphis courtroom had sparked this war, and Captain Leonard Grayson's empire had since burned her house, bombed her lawyer's car, and turned a rally into a massacre, pinning 3 deaths on her with a manslaughter charge. She forced herself up, leaning on the wall, the pain sharp but her resolve sharper. Her black jacket hung torn, borrowed jeans stiff with sweat, braids unraveling from the fight. The guard from last night, the young black woman with tight braids, slipped her water through the bars, eyes soft. "Trial's today, Judge. Hang on." Lenora nodded, sipping slow, ribs grinding with each breath. She'd spent 30 years in these courts, defending the defenseless, prosecuting rot, breaking ceilings as the first black female judge here, but now she was the accused, her own system, her cage. Denise Cole burst in at 8, suit crisp despite. The chaos, eyes blazing. "We've got a break. A cop's turning whistleblower," says Grayson ordered the snipers. Lenora's pulse quickened, hope flickering through the haze of pain. "Can we use it?" Denise grinned, fierce. "In court. Today. Let's go." They hauled her out, cuffs biting her wrists, ribs throbbing as they shoved her into a van, cameras flashing outside the precinct, the crowd thinner now but still chanting her name. The courthouse loomed, its marble steps stained with yesterday's blood, and they dragged her inside, the air thick with tension. The trial began at 10, the courtroom packed, reporters scribbling, onlookers whispering, Judge Evelyn Ross presiding, her stern face unreadable. Lenora sat at the defense table, Denise beside her, ribs aching under a borrowed grey blouse, every breath a knife. The prosecutor, a slick white man named Hargrove, stood, voice oily. "Lenora Tate incited a riot, leading to 3 deaths. She's a menace, not a judge." Denise shot up, slamming a file down. "We have testimony, Your Honor. Officer Jamal Pierce, 10 years on the force, says Captain Grayson hired the snipers to frame my client." The gallery gasped, head swiveling, and Ross leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Pierce took the stand, a wiry black man in his 30s, uniform traded for a plain shirt, hands trembling, but voice steady. "Grayson called me to a meet, night before. The rally. Said Tate's a problem, needs to go down, paid 2 shooters, ex-military, cash from a slush fund, I've got texts." He slid a phone across, screenshots glowing, Grayson's number stark. "Make it messy, pin it on her." The room erupted, shouts clashing, Ross banging her gavel, wood cracking like thunder. Lenora's chest swelled, pain fading under a rush of fire. Hargrove floundered, red-faced. "This is hearsay, a desperate lie," Denise pressed, voice cutting. "It's evidence, backed by records. Grayson's the killer here." Ross nodded, slow and grave. "I'll allow it. Proceed." The trial stretched, Pierce grilled, texts dissected, but his story held. A crack in Grayson's wall. By 4, Ross delivered, voice firm. "Manslaughter charges dismissed. Insufficient evidence. New testimony shifts culpability." Cheers exploded, the gallery shaking, and Lenora stood. Ribs screaming but spine straight, Denise gripping her arm, triumphant. She limped out, free again, the crowd swarming the steps, hands clapping her back, voices roaring. "Tate! Tate!" She hugged Denise, the whistleblower her lifeline, and felt it. A real win this time. Grayson's snipers exposed, her name cleared. She'd broken him, hadn't she? The precinct couldn't bury this. She stood in the sun, Memphis alive around, her believing she'd turned the tide. But Grayson wasn't done. That night she crashed at Tanya's, ribs taped by a paramedic, too raw to move far. The TV flickering low. Tanya brewed tea, hands shaking, when Lenora's phone buzzed, a news alert flashing. She clicked it, and her blood ran cold. Footage, streamed from a precinct lot, Grayson's voice booming, calm and venomous. "Judge Tate's a danger. She's framing good officers like me with lies." The anchor cut in, breathless. Breaking news. Tate's nephew, Jamal Tate, 17, arrested for drug trafficking. Police claim a kilo of cocaine found in his backpack. The screen flashed to Jamal, her sister's boy, skinny and wide-eyed, slammed into concrete by cops, cuffs snapping tight, a viral video racking up views. Lenora's mug shattered on the Floor tea splashing her feet as Tanya screamed, "That's my son." Lenora stumbled to the TV, ribs forgotten, heart hammering. Jamal, her Jamal, who'd biked to her house every Sunday, who'd aced math, who'd never touched drugs. She'd raised him like her own. She grabbed her phone, dialing Denise, voice raw. "They've got Jamal. It's a setup." Denise cursed, loud and sharp. "Grayson's hitting back, I'm on it," Tanya sobbed, clutching Lenora's arm, the room spinning. Then the burner rang, a cheap flip phone she'd bought after the threats, and she answered, breath shallow. Grayson's voice slithered through, low and taunting. "You're not the only one who can bleed, Tate. Your boy's mine now." The line clicked dead, and Lenora stood, trembling, the TV replaying Jamal's arrest, cops grinning as they pinned him down. She'd spent 30 years in these courts defending kids like him, prosecuting rot, breaking ceilings as the first black woman on the bench. She'd thought Pierce's testimony, the acquittal, were her sword, that she'd struck Grayson's heart. She'd limped out to cheers, felt the crowd's fire, believed she'd won. But he'd flipped it, savage and swift, targeting her family, planting drugs, turning her victory into a nightmare. She thought of the slap, the rally, the snipers, every step she'd taken to fight back, every scar earned over decades. She'd believed in the law, in its slow grind toward right, even after the fire, the bomb, the beating. But this was a beast unbound, a system that didn't just resist, it devoured. She'd cleared her name, sure, but at what cost? Jamal's cries echoed on screen, Tanya's wails filled the room, and Lenora's ribs burned, her hands balling into fists. She'd won nothing today, not really. Grayson had escalated, struck her blood, and she was helpless, watching her nephew break under his heel. She turned to Tanya, voice low. "We'll get him out." Tanya nodded, tears streaming, and Lenora grabbed the burner, dialing Denise again, ribs grinding. "Find me everything on that arrest, now." She stood, pain be damned, the war shifting beneath her feet. She'd lit a fire, thought she'd wielded it, but Grayson had seized it, turned it into this, a boy's life to bury her. Drop a comment. With number 1 if you're raging at Grayson's cruelty to Jamal, hit like if Lenora's fight still gives you chills, and subscribe because the next move's going to shake this city to its core. When a judge's family becomes the battlefield, how far will she push to strike back? Lenora Tate sat at Tanya's kitchen table, ribs aching under the tape from her beating 2 nights ago, her 60-year-old hands trembling as she clutched a cracked mug. 10 days had passed since Sergeant Victor Hale's slap in her Memphis courtroom sparked this war, and Captain Leonard Grayson's empire had since burned her house, massacred a rally, and framed her nephew Jamal for drug trafficking, his arrest video looping on every screen. She'd cleared her manslaughter charge yesterday, a whistleblower pinning the snipers on Grayson, but his taunt over the burner phone, "You're not the only one who can bleed," haunted her. Jamal, 17, her sister's boy, was locked. Up, bruised and scared, a kilo of cocaine planted in his backpack. She'd spent 30 years in these courts defending kids like him, and now he was her fight. Denise Cole burst in at 6, eyes wild, a laptop under her arm. "We're setting a trap, Lenora. I've got a journalist, Maya Reed, ready to sting Grayson." Lenora straightened, pain flaring but resolve steel. "How?" Denise grinned. "Fierce. Hidden mic, live feed. We bait him into confessing the frame job." Lenora nodded, slow and cold. "Do it." They met Maya at a dingy coffee shop off Union Avenue, a 30-year-old black woman with a buzz cut and a recorder clipped to her shirt. The plan was simple. Maya would pose as a crooked reporter, offer Grayson a bribe to spill, stream it live. Lenora handed her the burner, voice low. "Use this, he'll recognize it." By noon, Maya called Grayson, voice smooth. "Captain, I've got cash to kill the Tate story. Meet me at the old warehouse on Front Street, 2 o'clock. Bring dirt." He bit, gruff and eager. "I've got plenty. See you there." Lenora watched from a rented van a block away, Denise at the wheel, laptop streaming Maya's feed, the warehouse's rusted walls looming under a grey sky. At 2 sharp, Grayson rolled up in an unmarked black SUV, 6'4" frame stepping out. Uniform traded for a leather jacket, hazel eyes scanning. Maya met him inside, Mic live, her voice crackling through the van's speakers. 10 grand. To Barry Tate, what's your play? Grayson smirked, leaning close. She's done. Planted the coke on her nephew myself. Kid's a pawn, keeps her in line. Lenora's fists clenched, ribs grinding as the confession hit. Denise hissed, "Got him!" The feed went live, Maya's site racking up views, Twitter exploding. Was Grayson confesses trending? Lenora's chest swelled, a rush of fire drowning the pain. She'd cleared her name yesterday, thought she'd won. But this? This was the kill shot. Grayson's own words damning him. Maya pressed, cool as ice. "You framed the kid? Why?" He laughed, low and ugly. "Tate's a thorn. Burned her house, shot her rally, but she keeps coming. Jamal's my leash." The stream hit 1 million views, protests flaring outside the precinct again, signs sharp with rage. Lenora grabbed her phone, dialing the jail, voice tight. "This is Judge Tate. Release Jamal Tate now. Evidence proves a setup." The warden stammered, "I'll check." And 30 minutes later, Jamal walked free, skinny frame hobbling from bruises, Tanya sobbing as she hugged him outside. Lenora met them, ribs screaming but arms open, holding him tight, his tears soaking her borrowed jacket. "Auntie, I didn't do it," he whispered, and she nodded, fierce. "I know, baby. You're safe." She'd won, hadn't she? Grayson's suspension hit the news, the precinct reeling, his empire teetering. She'd turned the tide, broken him with his own voice. But Grayson wasn't done. That night, as Lenora crashed at Tanya's, Jamal asleep upstairs, the TV flickered low, tea cooling in her hands. A news alert flashed and her stomach dropped. Footage streamed from Maya's apartment, a crime scene cordoned off, cops swarming, lights flashing. The anchor's voice shook. "Journalist Maya Reed found dead. Execution style. 2 bullets. To the head. Apartment torched, originals of Grayson's confession gone." Lenora's mug slipped, shattering on the tile, tea pooling like blood, as Tanya gasped, "No!" Lenora stood, ribs forgotten, heart hammering. Maya, her weapon, her voice silenced, the sting's proof burned to ash. The anchor cut to Grayson, live from the precinct, face somber. "Tragic loss. Tate's lies got her killed. That tape's a fake, and I'll prove it." His hazel eyes glinted, a predator unscathed, and Lenora's breath hitched, fury coiling tight. She grabbed the burner, dialing Denise, voice raw. "Maya's dead, Grayson's countering." Denise cursed, loud and sharp. "He's got reach. I'm digging." But the blow landed fast. By midnight, the DA's office called. Richard Ellis's, voice oily. "Lenora, we're reviewing your license. That tape's questionable, and you're tied to a murder now. Disbarment's on the table." She gripped the phone, knuckles whitening. "This is Grayson's doing, Richard. You know it." He sighed, fake pity dripping. "Prove it." The line went dead, and she slammed it down, wood splintering. Tanya hovered, eyes wide. "Sis, what's happening?" Lenora shook her head, slow and cold. "He's winning." She'd thought the sting was her sword, Grayson's confession her shield, Jamal's freedom her proof. She'd felt the city's roar, believed she'd toppled him. But he'd struck back, savage and swift, killing Maya, burning the evidence, turning her victory into a noose. She sat staring at the TV, Grayson's smirk a ghost on screen, when a crash split the night. Glass shattered upstairs, Tanya screaming, "Jamal!" Lenora bolted, ribs howling, and found a SWAT team storming in, black gear glinting, rifles up. The leader, a white man with a buzz cut, barked, "Anonymous tip! Gang activity! Hands up!" They shoved past, boots thudding, and pinned Jamal to the floor, his cries muffled, a rifle to his back. Lenora lunged, pain exploding, but they pushed her down, knee on her spine, ribs cracking anew. The leader grinned, tearing through drawers, then paused, triumphant. "Found it!" He held up a baggie of white powder, planted fresh, and scrawled, a slur on the wall in red marker, "Monkey." Jamal sobbed, Tanya wailing, as they dragged him out again, cuffs snapping tight. Lenora crawled up, blood dripping from her nose, the SWAT team vanishing into the night, sirens fading. She'd spent 30 years in these courts, defending kids like Jamal, prosecuting rot, breaking ceilings as the first black woman on the bench. She'd thought the sting, the confession, were her strike, that she'd freed him, cracked Grayson's empire. She'd hugged Jamal, felt his breath, believed she'd won. But Grayson had escalated, turned her fight into a slaughter. Maya's blood on his hands, Jamal's life his pawn again. She thought of the slap, the rally, the snipers, every step she'd taken, every scar earned over decades. She'd believed in the law, in its slow grind toward right even after the fire, the bomb, the beating. But this was a beast unbound, a system that didn't just resist, it annihilated. She'd cleared her name, freed Jamal once, but at Selalu what cost? He was gone again, Tanya's cries echoing, the slur glaring on the wall. She stood, ribs shattered, blood staining her shirt, and grabbed the burner, voice low. Denise, they took him, SWAT, planted more. Denise's voice broke, grim. Grayson's not stopping. Lenora stared at the wall, the red letters a taunt, a dare. She'd lit a fire, thought she'd wielded it, but he'd seized it, turned it into this, a family broken to bury her. Lenora Tate knelt on Tanya's living room floor, blood dripping from her nose onto the hardwood, ribs fractured anew from the SWAT raid that had just torn through 11 days after Sergeant Victor Hale's slap in her Memphis courtroom sparked this war. Captain Leonard Grayson's empire had framed her nephew Jamal again, planting drugs and dragging him back to jail, the slur monkey scrawled in red on the wall, still glaring in the dim light. Her 60-year-old body trembled. The sting, that got Grayson suspended yesterday. His confession to framing Jamal, now ash with Maya Reed's murder, her apartment torched, the originals gone. Tanya sobbed in the corner, cradling a photo of Jamal, 17 and bruised, while Lenora stood, pain searing but resolve iron. She'd spent 30 years in these courts, defending kids like him, and now she was out of moves. She grabbed the burner phone, dialing Denise Cole, voice raw. They took Jamal again, SWAT, planted more, we need the feds. Denise's breath hitched, grim. I'm on it. Hang tight. Lenora hung up, wiping blood with her sleeve, the borrowed jeans, stiff with sweat, her taped ribs grinding. She'd cleared her name twice, freed Jamal once, thought the sting was her sword, but Grayson had killed Maya, flipped it, and struck her family again. By dawn, Denise called back, voice sharp. Feds are in. DOJ's launching a probe into Grayson, the precinct, everything. Meet me at the Federal Building, 9. Lenora drove Tanya's red Honda through Memphis, the Mississippi River a dull gray under a heavy sky, her arm throbbing from the shrapnel scar, ribs screaming with each turn. The Federal Building loomed downtown, a fortress of glass and steel, and she limped inside, Denise waiting in a stark lobby, suit rumpled but eyes fierce. They're seizing files, Lenora, dozens of complaints against Grayson, buried deep. We've got traction. Lenora nodded, slow and cold, hope flickering. Agents in dark jackets bustled past, laptops open, phones buzzing. And by noon the probe hit the news, headlines blazing. Feds target Memphis PD in Tate case. Files piled up, 30 years of rot spilling out, excessive force, missing. Evidence? Black civilians dead under Grayson's watch, complaints dismissed by a web of cronies. Lenora sat in a conference room, Denise beside her, flipping through pages. Her breath catching at names she'd defended decades ago, kids she'd lost to this machine. A Fed, a tall black woman named Agent Carla Hayes, leaned in, voice steady. We've got enough to suspend half the precinct, maybe indict Grayson. You did this, Judge. Lenora's chest swelled, ribs aching but spirit lifting. She'd begged for this, thought the sting was her peak, but this probe was bigger, a federal hammer to crack Grayson's empire. Protests swelled outside, thousands, chanting her name again, signs sharp with rage, and she felt it, a real win this time. She'd turned the tide, hadn't she? The feds could bury him now. But Grayson had a shadow. By evening, the probe faltered. Lenora crashed at Tanya's, ribs taped tighter, watching TV when a news alert flashed. The anchor's voice shook. Federal probe into Memphis PD stalled. State Senator William Voss, a Grayson ally, intervened, citing overreach. Sources say agents were bribed, files locked. Lenora's mug slipped, tea splashing her lap as Tanya gasped, "What?" She stood, ribs forgotten, heart hammering. "Voss," a silver-haired white man with a plantation drawl appeared on screen, calm and venomous. "This is a witch hunt against good officers. I've ensured justice prevails." Lenora grabbed the burner, dialing Denise, voice raw. "Voss killed. Hit. Feds are out." Denise cursed, loud and sharp. "He's got juice, Lenora. Bought them off." The blow landed fast, but worse came at 8. Tanya's phone rang, a neighbor's voice frantic. "Car accident. Your street." Lenora bolted outside, ribs howling, and saw it. A mangled blue sedan Tanya's T-boned in the intersection, glass glittering on asphalt. Tanya ran up, screaming, "I was at the store." Paramedics swarmed, pulling her from the wreck, leg twisted at a sick angle, bone jutting through skin. Lenora stumbled forward, breath shallow, as they loaded her into an ambulance, sirens wailing. A cop, a white guy with a smirk, shrugged. "Drunk driver fled. Happens." She knew it wasn't random, not with Grayson's reach, Voss's pull. Tanya's leg was shattered, her cries echoing as the ambulance sped off, and Lenora stood, trembling, the street empty but alive with threat. She drove to the hospital, ribs grinding, and sat by Tanya's bed. Her sister sedated, leg in a cast, the room sterile and cold. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number, and she answered, voice low. Grayson's growl slithered through. "Last warning, Tate." A photo pinged. Jamal at school, circled in red, last warning scrawled in blood. Lenora screamed into the night, the burner cracking in her grip, the hospital hall silent but suffocating. She'd begged the feds, thought the probe was her shield, the files her sword, Jamal's freedom her proof. She'd felt the city's roar, believed she'd won. But Grayson had escalated, turned her fight into a slaughter, Voss his puppet, Tanya's leg his message, Jamal's life his threat. She thought of her 30 years, defending kids like him, prosecuting rot, breaking ceilings as the first black woman on the bench. She'd believed in the law, in its slow grind toward right, even after the slap, the fire, the snipers, the beating. But this was a beast unbound, a system that didn't just resist, it crippled. She'd cleared her name, sparked the probe, but at what cost? Jamal was caged again, Tanya broken, and the feds were gone, bought off by a senator's cash. She stood by Tanya's bed, ribs fractured, blood dry on her lip, and grabbed the burner, voice low. "Denise, Voss is in it. Find me something." Denise's voice broke, grim. "He's deep, Lenora. I'll dig." Lenora stared at the photo. Jamal's face a ghost, the red circle a noose. She'd spent decades in these courts, fighting for folks like him, scars earned breaking walls they never wanted her to touch. She'd thought the sting, the probe, were her strike, that she'd cracked Grayson's empire. She'd felt the files pile up, believed justice was close. But Grayson had flipped it, savage and swift, crippling her sister, threatening her nephew, burying the feds. She thought of the slap, the rally, the bomb, every step she'd taken, every win snatched away. She'd believed in the law, in its slow bend toward right, even after the mob, the frame, the raid. But now, standing in that sterile room, Tanya's, breath shallow, Jamal's photo burning her eyes, she saw it clear. This wasn't just about Grayson anymore. This was the system she'd served, bearing its fangs, and she was its prey. She'd won nothing today, not the probe, not her family's safety. Grayson had struck harder, deadlier, pinning her with her own blood, and she was running out of moves. She sat, ribs grinding, the photo trembling in her hand, and whispered, "To the dark." Not yet. She'd lit a fire, thought she'd wielded it, but he'd seized it, turned it into this, a family shattered to bury her. Lenora Tate sat by Tanya's hospital bed, ribs fractured and taped, the photo of Jamal circled in red with last warning, scrawled in blood, trembling in her 60-year-old hands. 12 days ago, Sergeant Victor Hale's slap in her Memphis courtroom had ignited this war, and Captain Leonard Grayson's empire had since burned her house, killed Maya Reed, and crippled Tanya in a staged crash after the federal probe crumbled under Senator Voss's bribes. Jamal, her 17-year-old nephew, was back in jail, framed again, and Grayson's threat loomed like a guillotine. She'd spent 30 years in these courts, defending kids like him, breaking ceilings as the first black woman on the bench. But now she was cornered, her family bleeding for her fight. She stood, pain searing her chest, borrowed jeans stiff with hospital antiseptic, and kissed Tanya's forehead, her sister's leg in a cast, breath shallow under sedation. Denise Cole called, voice sharp. "Grayson's at a precinct gala tonight. Downtown Hilton, 8, we can hit him there." Lenora's jaw set cold and fierce. "I'm in." She drove Tanya's red Honda through Memphis, the Mississippi River, a black ribbon under a starless sky, ribs grinding with each turn, the burner phone heavy in her pocket. The Hilton glowed, a glass tower packed with cops, politicians and donors, a celebration of Grayson's untouchable reign. She parked, grabbed a megaphone from Denise's trunk and limped to the entrance, black jacket torn, braids loose from the war. At 8 sharp, she stormed the lobby, megaphone crackling, voice booming over the chatter of tuxedos and gowns. "Leonard Grayson's a murderer. He burned my home, shot a rally, framed my nephew, killed a journalist. 3 black civilians dead on his watch, files buried by Voss." The room froze, champagne flutes clinking, faces paling as she thrust. The bloody photo high, Jamal's face a silent scream. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, phones streaming live. The crowd parting as Grayson emerged, 6'4", leather jacket swapped for dress blues, hazel eyes blazing. "You're unhinged, Tate," he barked, voice carrying, "spreading lies." She stepped closer, megaphone down, voice low but lethal. "You confessed on tape, ordered snipers, crippled my sister. You're done." The gallery gasped, shouts erupting, and cops moved in, but a live feed hit screens, her Darkest Grayson exposed trending, the city watching. At 9, feds crashed the gala. Dark jackets glinting, Agent Carla Hayes barking, "Leonard Grayson, you're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, obstruction." Cuffs clicked, his wrists locked, cameras whirring as they dragged him out, his roar echoing, "This isn't over, Tate." Lenora stood, ribs aching but chest swelling, the crowd stunned, some cheering, others hissing. She'd crashed his night, exposed him live, got him cuffed. She'd won, hadn't she? His empire was cracking, the feds her hammer. She limped outside, Denise gripping her arm, the night alive with sirens, believing she'd turned the tide. But Grayson's reach stretched. Further. By 10, Senator Voss bailed him out, cash flowing like water, and Grayson walked free, smirking on the precinct steps, news vans swarming. Lenora drove back to Tanya's, ribs howling, the Honda's engine whining, when her phone buzzed, a text from Denise. "He's out." "Be careful," she cursed, pulling onto a dark road off Poplar Avenue, trees looming when headlights flared behind her, blinding in the mirror. A black SUV rammed her bumper, metal crunching, and she swerved, tires screeching, ribs slamming. Against the seatbelt. The SUV surged again, smashing her off the road, the Honda spinning into a ditch, glass shattering, airbag bursting in her face. She gasped, blood flooding her mouth, ribs cracking through the tape, when the driver's door yanked open. Grayson loomed, leather jacket back, a Glock in hand, hazel eyes glinting with venom. "Told you it wasn't over," he snarled, and fired, the bullet tearing through her chest, a white-hot lance of pain. She slumped, blood soaking her jacket, vision blurring as he stepped back, smirking. "You lose, Tate." He tossed the gun aside, headlights fading as he drove off, leaving her in the ditch, the night swallowing her whole. She lay there, breath shallow, blood pooling under her, the burner slipping from her pocket, Jamal's photo fluttering free, red circles stark against the dirt. She'd spent 30 years in these courts, defending the defenseless, prosecuting rot, breaking ceilings they never wanted her to touch. She'd thought the gala crash, the live exposure, the cuffs on Grayson, were her strike, that she'd broken, his empire. She'd felt the crowd's shock, believed justice was hers, but he'd flipped it, savage and swift, bailed out by Voss, ambushing her here, a bullet to end her fight. She thought of the slap, the sting, the rally, every step she'd taken, every scar earned over decades. She'd believed in the law, in its slow grind toward right, even after the fire, the snipers, the beating, the frames. But this was a beast unbound, a system that didn't just resist, it killed. She'd crashed his gala, got him cuffed, but at what cost? Jamal was still caged, Tanya broken, and now she was bleeding out, Grayson's victory sealed in her chest. Sirens wailed, distant, as headlights cut the dark, a patrol car rolling up slow. 2 cops stepped out, white, smirking, voices crackling. Over the radio. Found Tate. She attacked Grayson, forced us to shoot. Lenora's breath hitched, blood bubbling in her throat, their lie a final twist. They stood over her, boots crunching gravel, one kicking the burner away, the other snapping photos framing her last gasp. She'd won nothing tonight, not the showdown, not the war. Grayson had struck harder, deadlier, pinning her with her own blood, his empire bending but unbroken. She thought of her 30 years, the battles, the nights alone with case files, fighting for folks like Jamal, like Tanya, like herself, scars earned breaking walls. She'd believed in the law, in its slow bend toward right, even after the mob, the bomb, the raid. But now, sprawled in that ditch, chest torn open, cops spinning their tail, she saw it clear. This wasn't just about Grayson anymore. This was the system she'd served, bearing its fangs, and she was its prey. Her vision dimmed, the photo of Jamal fluttering in the wind, red circle fading, as the cops radioed in. Suspect down, self-defense. She'd lit a fire, thought she'd wielded it, but he'd seized it, turned it into this, a bullet to bury her. The ER loomed as paramedics rushed her in, tires screeching, lights flashing, doctors shouting over her flatlining pulse. They cut. Her jacket, blood soaking the gurney, ribs exposed, chest gaping, as machines wailed, a frantic dance to pull her back. She hovered, breath gone, the war slipping away, Grayson's smirk a ghost in her fading sight, and the world went black. Lenora Tate woke to the hiss of a ventilator, tubes snaking from her arms, a sterile white ceiling blurring into focus above her 60-year-old frame. Pain seared her chest, the bullet from Captain Leonard Grayson's Glock, a jagged memory tearing. Through her ribs, fractured and taped from beatings, now stitched and screaming under bandages. 13 days ago, Sergeant Victor Hale's slap in her Memphis courtroom had ignited this war, and Grayson's empire had since burned her house, killed Maya Reed, crippled Tanya, and framed Jamal, her 17-year-old nephew, twice over. Last night she'd crashed his gala, megaphone blazing, got him cuffed on live TV, only for Senator Voss to bail him out, Grayson ambushing her car, shooting her point blank, leaving her bleeding in a ditch as cops spun their lie. She attacked him. She'd flatlined in the ER, doctors shouting over her fading pulse, but now she breathed alive, broken but unburied. The hospital room hummed, machines beeping, her borrowed jeans swapped for a gown, blood crusted on her lip from the crash. Denise Cole sat beside her, eyes red from sleeplessness, suit rumpled. "You're a miracle, Lenora. Bullet missed your heart by an inch." Lenora coughed, ribs grinding, voice a rasp. "Grayson." Denise's jaw tightened. "Charged with attempted murder, locked up tight this time. Feds took him after the crash." Lenora exhaled, shallow and sharp, hope flickering through the haze. She'd spent 30 years in these courts, defending kids like Jamal, breaking ceilings as the first black woman on the bench. And now she'd survived, Grayson caged, his empire teetering. She thought of the gala, the cuffs, the shot, every step she'd taken, every scar earned. She'd won, hadn't she? She'd broken him, even if it cost her this. But she was done. 2 days later, the hospital discharged her, ribs braced, chest stitched, a cane in hand to steady her hobbling gait. The news blared, Grayson's arrest a headline, protests still raging outside the precinct, signs sharp with her name. She limped into a press conference at the courthouse, Denise at her side, cameras flashing, mics thrusting forward. Her voice rasped, steady despite the pain. "I'm resigning my judgeship. I've fought for 30 years, but this war's taken enough. I'm alive. Grayson's down, and that's my win." The room gasped, reporters shouting, "Why now?" "What's next?" She raised a hand, silencing them. "I lit a fire, others can carry it." She stepped down, cane tapping marble, the crowd parting, some clapping, others stunned. Jamal met her outside, free again. the second frame job tossed with Grayson's fall. His skinny frame trembling as he hugged her, Tanya hobbling behind on crutches, legs still casted. "Auntie, you're safe," he whispered, and she nodded, fierce, holding him tight. "You too, baby." He pulled back, eyes bright. "I'm going to law school. Your fight's mine now." Lenora's chest swelled, ribs aching but spirit lifting, her legacy alive in him. She'd cleared her name, freed Jamal, got Grayson. Locked, she'd won, a bittersweet triumph, her body broken but her family whole. She drove them to Tanya's in the red Honda, the city buzzing beyond the windows, and crashed on the couch, ribs throbbing, believing she'd turned the tide, that her resignation was the end, the empire cracked. But fate had one last card. That night as she slept, a nurse slipped into Tanya's house. A young black woman with tight braids, the same guard from her cell days ago, eyes soft but urgent. She pressed a USB drive into Lenora's hand, voice a whisper. From an anonymous, "Friend, watch it." Lenora frowned, ribs grinding as she sat up, Tanya snoring upstairs, Jamal in his room. She grabbed Tanya's laptop, plugged it in, and clicked play. Breath catching as Grayson's face filled the screen, grainy but unmistakable, recorded in a cell days before her gala crash. His voice growled, low and raw. "If I go down, they all do. Voss bankrolled the snipers, the frames, 10 years of dirt. D.A. Ellis buried complaints, 3 precinct captains ran hits. Senators got a slush fund tied to Atlanta contractors, millions to keep us clean." He listed names, dates, accounts, a decade-long racist conspiracy spilling out, his hazel eyes glinting with defiance. "Tate thinks she's won, but this burns the house down." The video cut to static, and Lenora's hands shook, the USB a bomb in her palm. Her chest heaved, stitches pulling as the truth sank in. This wasn't just Grayson's confession, it was a kill shot, a dying whistleblower's gift from beyond the grave, implicating Voss, Ellis, and 10 others in a web she'd barely scratched. She thought of Pierce, the cop who'd turned on Grayson at her trial, dead now, she realized. His suicide too convenient. She dialed Denise, voice trembling. "Get over here now. We've got everything." Denise arrived, eyes wide. And they watched it again, the laptop's glow painting their faces, Grayson's words a wrecking ball. "He's dead," Denise whispered. "Found in his cell this morning, hanged. They're calling it suicide." Lenora's breath hitched, ribs forgotten, fury coiling tight. "He didn't kill himself, they did." She grabbed the burner, hands steady despite the pain, and called Agent Carla Hayes, voice low. "I've got a confession, Grayson's, names the whole network. Leak it." By dawn, the USB hit the news, pirated streams racking up millions. Memphis burns trending, Grayson's voice echoing citywide. Voss bankrolled the snipers, Ellis buried complaints. The city erupted, protests swelling to 10,000. Precinct windows shattering, feds swarming back in, Voss's mansion raided, Ellis's office sealed, captains cuffed on live TV. Lenora sat on Tanya's couch, TV blaring, Jamal beside her. Tanya hobbling in, eyes wide. The empire didn't just crumble, it burned. A decade of rot torched by a dead man's words. Headlines screamed, "Grayson's suicide confession topples Memphis corruption." And Lenora stared at the screen, Grayson's cell photo flashing, a noose around his neck, a note in his hand. She won. Her breath caught, ribs aching. The twist sinking in. She'd spent 30 years in these courts, defending kids like Jamal, prosecuting rot, breaking ceilings they never wanted her to touch. She'd thought the gala, the cuffs, her survival were her strike, that her resignation was the end, Grayson's jail her win. She'd limped away, broken but alive, believing she'd cracked his empire, left it for others. But this was a beast unleashed, a system she'd served bearing its guts, and she'd lit the match from her hospital bed. She thought of the slap, the sting, the rally, every step she'd taken, every scar earned over decades. She'd believed in the law, in its slow grind toward right even after the fire, the snipers, the beating, the bomb, the frames, the shot. But now, watching Voss dragged out, Ellis sweating on air, captains cowering, she saw it clear. This wasn't just about Grayson anymore. This was the system she'd fought, collapsing under its own weight, and she'd won, not with her gavel, but with his ghost. She'd resigned, sure, but at what cost turned to triumph? Jamal was free, Tanya healing, and the empire was ash, a legacy beyond her robe. She stood, cane tapping, ribs grinding, and limped to the window, Memphis alive with rage and reckoning, beyond the glass. She'd lit a fire, thought she'd lost it, but Grayson had seized it, turned it into this, a confession to bury them all, his death her victory. She smiled, faint and fierce. The war hers at last.